Well, thank you for joining us today to learn a little bit more about three projects the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board is working on this summer and going across the city to provide information to residents. One of them is Close the Gap, another one is RecQuest, and the third one is Service Area Master Plans. I'm Jennifer Ringgold. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and I'll be spending the next little bit of time with you telling you more about these projects. As we get into this, I want you to think about really two key questions that we're looking at across the system right now. One of them is, what are we doing about our funding needs in the neighborhood parks? And the second one is, what are we looking for in our system over the next 25 to 30 years? What are the strategic changes we should be making? And how do we want to be better serving the residents of Minneapolis? That first question really ties in with Closing the Gap, which looks at our neighborhood funding needs. And that second question focuses specifically on RecQuest, which looks at our recreation centers, and Service Area Master Plans, which looks at the exterior of the facilities within our neighborhood parks. As I work through this presentation for you today, you will note that I talk about neighborhood parks specifically. Some of you may know that we also have regional parks within our system, and it's important for us to distinguish the two of them in these three projects. Regional parks are those parks like the River Gorge, the Mississippi River Corridor, the Minnehaha Creek Corridor, Minnehaha Park, Worth Park, or, for example, the Chain of Lakes. They are our larger parks, typically over 1,000 acres in size, and they are primarily funded with state funding. They also are common recipients of federal funding. The focus of our conversation today, however, is really around neighborhood parks. These are our parks that are somewhere between 1 to 6 blocks in size. They hold the primary assets that neighborhoods use, whether it's a recreation center, a wading pool, a playground, and they are funded primarily through local tax dollars. So they're primarily funded by the funding that's gathered within the city of Minneapolis. What we are doing right now is we're working our way across the city, sharing information about these projects. We are also doing several events throughout the city where we have information boards where individuals who are attending events, who are attending maybe activities within a park can learn more about these projects. And we're also taking time to reach out to our partners, say the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club or other groups who we partner with on a regular basis and delivering this information and discussing this information with them as well. So Closing the Gap, what do we know about the funding issues within our neighborhood parks? We know since about 2000, the board has really been focusing on what we're going to be doing from a neighborhood park perspective on funding. And we have started to see in that time period that from both an operating as well as a capital perspective, the current level of infrastructure, the current level of need that we have within our system is outpacing the level of funding that we have. Over the last 3 to 4 years, the board has particularly looked at ways that we can be more efficient with the dollars that we have. And in some cases been able to find some opportunities to create efficiencies, especially in our forestry area is one example. But we are really to the point now where there is not an opportunity to create a lot more efficiency within our workforce, within the methodologies that we use. And the board is interested in making sure residents across the city are aware of the concerns that we have or are starting to have around funding our neighborhood parks. If we started with operations, for example, and we looked at typical activities that we do in operations, whether it's mowing, whether it's tree pruning, whether it's repairing roofs, whether it's any of those standard services that we provide on a maintenance level, we know that we would need about $3 million more a year from our current funding level to be able to be at the ideal level in those categories. For example, if we were to look at mowing, we know we've got 2,750 acres of lawn that needs to be mown throughout the neighborhood park system. We know that currently it takes 14 days, so essentially 2 weeks, to get completely through that system. Ideally, we would be doing that in about a 10-day cycle. To move from 14 to 10 days would be an additional $875,000 the board would need to invest in mowing activities in order to be able to achieve that, kind of close that gap between 14 and 10 days. And there are several other categories where you can see that similar type of increase in cost. That would be to take it from our current level to the desired level. In total, that equates to about $3 million additional needed per year. On the capital side, we've taken a close look at our golf, our neighborhood park, our fleet, so all of the equipment and vehicles that we use throughout the park system to maintain it, our parkways, our lighting, and then our information services. And from 2000 to 2015, if we just look at those categories of capital, we know we're $140 million behind in the amount of funding we should be providing into those capital assets. Of that $140 million, 80% of it is related to neighborhood parks. That's $111 million that we are behind, that we didn't invest between 2000 and 2015 into our neighborhood parks. If we look forward to 2020 and say, okay, if here's where we're at, where will we be in 2020? We know we will add an additional $46 million to that gap. And if we look forward from 2020 to 2040, we will add an additional $304 million to that gap. So by 2040, we will have created a gap of $461 million between 2000 and 2040 in our neighborhood capital infrastructure. If we break that down just to an annual amount, so if we just look at 2016, the needs for 2016 would be $14.3 million. The park board on average receives between $4 to $5 million a year in capital. That's based on net debt bonds and capital levy. So we'd have a gap of $9.3 million in 2016. To help you see how this looks from an asset perspective, so by the key physical assets that we have in our system, whether it's recreation centers as a group, playgrounds as a group, wading pools as a group, we've put together what we call a park profile. On the back of that sheet, you will see a series of bar charts, and it'll be by category. And if you take a look, for example, at playgrounds, you will see there's a green bar. That green bar represents the amount the board has been able to invest in playgrounds between 2000 and 2015. The next bar on that chart for playgrounds is a light green bar. That light green bar is the amount that's in our capital program from 2016 through 2020. So that's the amount that we're anticipating investing in playgrounds over the next 5 years. The red bar is the value that we have not been able to invest, or the gap in the neighborhood playgrounds. And along the right-hand column of those bars, you will see a series of numbers in red circles. That actually gives you the value, so how much that red bar is worth. And in this particular case of playgrounds, that's $9.4 million that we should have invested in that time period and didn't in playgrounds. And it's important to take a look at those red circles because it helps you get a sense of scale. So if you looked at another example on it, if you looked at pedestrian bridges where you see a solid red bar, the value of that is $1.6 million. So it's important to look at both the relationship of the green, the light green, and the red bars across a particular asset, but then also make sure to look at the actual dollar value of that red bar. The total at the end of that page equals $156 million, which is the gap that we project between 2000 and 2020. And then the gray circles on the far right of that document shows you if we project forward to 2040 and there's nothing that changes within the system, we continue to have the same level of assets with the same level of funding. By 2040, we'll be at a $458 million gap. If you turn that page over, and this will be the same for any park within the system. I happen to be looking at an example for Logan Park at the moment. And you look across the top of that park, you will see a white box. That white box tells you the funding need for that park between 2000 and 2020. And for Logan Park, for example, the funding need was $3.4 million. So based on the infrastructure that's in that park, whether that's a wading pool, a building, fields, we know that to keep all of that infrastructure in its best condition, we should have been investing $3.4 million in that time period. The green box that's next to it is the amount we were able to invest in the park, which is $550,000. The next box, the light green box, tells you how much we are anticipating investing before 2020. And in this case, there isn't anything allocated in the capital program between now and 2020. The first red box then tells you the gap, how much we didn't invest during that time period in Logan Park, which is $2.9 million. Then we project that forward to 2040, and we see if things stay as they are, by 2040, we'll be at a $7.3 million gap for capital infrastructure within Logan Park. A couple of other things on this profile that I would like to point out. The first one is the life cycle and replacement date, which shows you a series of assets: athletic fields, field lighting, playgrounds, recreation center. It'll be custom to each park based on the assets that are in it. And then you see a replacement date. That is the date that that asset should be replaced or completely refreshed in order to be able to live on to the next life cycle. So what does that mean exactly? Well, every asset within the park, say a playground, for example, has a life expectancy. We expect it to be in good condition for the public to use for, say, 20 to 25 years. A recreation center is more on the scale of 50 years. So we can look at the build date or the reconstruction date of each of the assets and project forward when it should be replaced. Then we know, based on the value of that asset, how much it would cost to build it, how much we should be setting aside each year to be able to replace it at its appropriate date. So if you look at life cycle and replacement, that's how we're able to determine how much funding is needed over a certain time period for a particular park. You will notice some of the replacement dates are in red. In those cases, we've already passed them. We are living literally on borrowed time with those assets, and they are, they're in some cases still performing, but they are potentially using more maintenance dollars and operating dollars to sustain. Then you will see a series of pie charts. We have on the top two pie charts, we have the contrast between where we've made investments and where we haven't made investments within that particular park. So if you look at Logan, for example, you'll see the primary asset that's been invested in between 2000 and 2020 is the wading pool, and then some investment in the parking lot. In that same time period, you can see that recreation centers, playgrounds, athletic fields did not receive an investment. The bottom two pie charts really tell you from a different graphic perspective the difference between the allocation and the gap from 2000 to 2020, and then looking forward to 2040. It's important to note that a system of the size of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation System and the age of it is a common, we're not alone, I should say, in terms of infrastructure being behind, in terms of being improved. Many cities of our size and age are struggling with some of the same issues Minneapolis is struggling with right now. And many of them are choosing different scenarios in terms of how to address them. Some of them are choosing to do nothing. Others are looking at investment strategies. And some of them are talking to their residents about what the strategies might be moving forward. The Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board has a few things in place that it's doing. First of all, in February of 2015, it conducted a statistically valid phone survey to get a better understanding of people's perceptions of the parks, what's working, what's not working, their interest in potential funding strategies for the parks, their needs around programs, services, and infrastructure. Then from May until September, the board is going out to neighborhoods across the city, visiting with residents, trying to get an understanding of residents' preferences around improvements in the parks, as well as ideas for addressing the funding gap. And then from October through December, the board will be looking at all the data we've collected and beginning to determine what their next step is going to be to address the funding gap. It's an important conversation at the same time that we're looking at funding gaps to make sure that that we are, as an organization, providing the right level of program services infrastructure to residents and visitors of Minneapolis. So at the same time we are talking about the potential funding issues, the board is also asking questions about how are our recreation centers? Are they providing to the needs of residents and visitors? How is the exterior aspects of our parks? Are they providing to the needs and interests of residents? One of the main things that the board is trying to understand is the current level of service the appropriate level of service? Should it be more? Should it be less? So that as it looks at this funding gap, it has a clear understanding of whether the numbers that we are working with today are the right numbers. So within that context, we go back to that project of RecQuest as well as that project of service area master plans. And RecQuest looks specifically at recreation centers across the city. It's a citywide project. It will end with a vision that sets the next generation of recreation centers across Minneapolis. We are anticipating being done with that project by the spring of 2016. The service area master plans are where we look strategically at each of the 5 service areas across the city of Minneapolis. We will have them all done by 2018, but we're working on 2 of them right now. One is in downtown and the other one is in South Minneapolis. The focus of this project, the service area master plans, is to be able to fully understand the exterior infrastructure of each neighborhood park. So the end goal is to have a master plan for each neighborhood park that articulates any changes in terms of fields, in terms of types of activities for youth, wading pools, playgrounds, in terms of needs for adults, in terms of whatever that infrastructure should look on the exterior. We'll use the information we gather from the south and the downtown service areas to understand by order of magnitude what the changes might need to be in the other service areas as well. The downtown and the south service area should be complete by the end of this year or early 2016, and all of the service area master plans should be complete by 2018. Our website contains considerable information about all of these projects. There's a list of websites for Close the Gap, RecQuest, and then both the South and the Downtown Service Area master plans. That would be a great opportunity for you to learn more about each project. Thank you for spending some time with us today to learn more about these 3 projects. In terms of next steps, we hope you would go online, take a look at the park profiles for your area, and fill out the survey that's available online. That survey helps provide the board with information about your needs and your interests from a park and recreation perspective, and will help inform their decisions as they think about how to address the funding gap in neighborhood parks moving forward. We also have a special invitation for you. On September 29th, we have experts coming in from other cities who have addressed some of these same issues. They will be in a panel discussion September 29th from 6 until 7:30 p.m. at the Walker Art Center. So please join us there. Thank you.